I miss him so much.
I know, me too.
But we're together.
Always.
Subscribe to Wild West Soul Stories. Hit the bell, like, comment, and share. Thanks for watching. The dust rose beneath the hooves of his tired horse as Elijah Tanner crested the final hill, overlooking the valley he once called home. 8 years had passed since he rode away from this land. A boy of 19 with nothing but heartbreak in his chest and anger burning through his veins. Now he returned a man of 27, weathered by cattle drives, harsh winters, and loneliness that settled into his bones like permanent frost. His father was dead. The telegram had found him in Montana, working another man's ranch because he never had one of his own. The words were simple and cold. Your father passed. Land goes to you. Come home. Home. The word felt strange on his tongue, foreign like a language he had forgotten how to speak. This place had never truly been home. Not after his mother died when he was 15, not after his father buried himself in whiskey and bitterness, and certainly not after Rosemary Colton married another man 3 weeks before Elijah had planned to ask for her hand. He nudged his horse forward, descending into the valley where golden grass swayed in the afternoon breeze. The Tanner property sprawled before him, smaller than he remembered but still substantial. The main house stood weathered but sturdy, its white paint faded to gray in places. The barn leaned slightly eastward, and the fences needed mending, but the land itself remained beautiful, untouched by the cruelty of time that had aged everything else. Elijah dismounted near the water trough, letting his horse drink while he stretched muscles stiff from 3 weeks of travel. He removed his hat, running fingers through dark hair, now streaked with early hints of gray at his temples. His jaw carried stubble he hadn't bothered to shave, and his eyes, once bright with youthful hope, had turned the color of storms gathering over mountain peaks. He heard her before he saw her. A woman's voice drifted from behind the house, soft and melodic, calling to someone named Daniel. Elijah's heart stuttered, recognizing that voice immediately despite the years, despite everything. He walked around the corner of the house, boots crunching on dried leaves, and there she stood in a vegetable garden, her hands covered in dark soil, her auburn hair escaping from a simple braid that hung down her back. Rosemary. She looked up, and time collapsed between them like a bridge giving way to floodwaters. Her green eyes widened, her lips parted, and for one eternal moment, neither of them breathed. She had aged as all people do, but to Elijah, she had only grown more beautiful. Fine lines gathered at the corners of her eyes from years of squinting against the sun. Her hands were rough from work, and her dress was simple cut, practical rather than pretty. But she was still Rosemary, still the girl who had consumed his thoughts through countless lonely nights, still the woman whose memory he could never outrun, no matter how far he rode. A small boy appeared from behind her skirts, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, with sandy hair and curious eyes. He clutched a wooden horse in his dirty hands, and stared at Elijah with the open suspicion that children reserve for strangers. Elijah, Rosemary whispered, and his name on her lips nearly brought him to his knees. Rose. He managed to keep his voice steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs like a wild thing seeking escape. What are you doing here? She stood slowly, brushing soil from her apron with trembling hands. I could ask you the same thing. My father died. This land is mine now. The words came out harsher than he intended, defensive and cold. But that doesn't explain why you're standing in my garden on my property. Rosemary's expression shifted, and he watched understanding dawn in her eyes, followed quickly by something that looked like fear. Elijah, there's something you need to know, something nobody told you, apparently. Mama. The boy tugged at her skirt, and she reached down automatically to stroke his hair. Go inside, Daniel. Get yourself some water. I'll be there soon. The child obeyed reluctantly, casting one more suspicious glance at Elijah before disappearing through the back door of the house that belonged to Elijah, the house where this woman and her child apparently lived. Explain, Elijah said, crossing his arm over his chest, trying to ignore the way his pulse raced just from standing near her. Rosemary took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders as if preparing for battle. After Thomas died 3 years ago, I had nowhere to go. The bank took our farm because Thomas had borrowed against it without telling me. I was a widow with a 2-year-old son and nothing to my name. Your father took us in. My father, Elijah repeated, disbelief coloring his tone. The same man who couldn't be bothered to attend my mother's funeral because he was too drunk to stand? He changed, Elijah. After you left, something broke inside him, but then something healed too. He stopped drinking. He worked the land. He became the man your mother always believed he could be. Rosemary's voice cracked with emotion. He saved my life. He saved Daniel's life. And before he died, he asked me to stay here to take care of this place until you came home. He always believed you would come home. Elijah turned away, unable to face her while processing this information. His father, sober and kind. His father, taking in a young widow and her child, it didn't match the man he remembered. The man who had driven him away with harsh words and harder silences. I have nowhere else to go, Rosemary continued softly. If you want us to leave, I understand. But I'm asking you, Elijah, for the sake of whatever we once meant to each other, give me time to find another situation. A month, that's all I ask. He spun back to face her, anger and old hurt surging through his chest. Whatever we once meant to each other. You married another man, Rosemary. 3 weeks before I was going to ask you to be my wife. You married Thomas Whitmore. Tears welled in her eyes, and she pressed a hand to her mouth to suppress a sob. You think I wanted to? You think I had a choice? Everyone has a choice. Not when your father owes money to a man who says he'll forgive the debt if you marry his son. The words burst from her like water breaking through a dam. My father gambled away everything we had. He owed Thomas's father more money than we could ever repay. The alternative was debtor's prison for my father and destitution for my mother and younger sisters. I sacrificed myself for my family, Elijah. I did what I had to do to survive. Elijah stood frozen, the anger draining from him like blood from a wound. All these years, he had believed she hadn't loved him, that she had chosen comfort and security over what they shared. All these years he had nursed that betrayal, let it harden him, let it convince him that love was a fool's errand. You never told me, he said quietly. I tried. I came to find you the night before the wedding, but you had already gone. You rode out of town without saying goodbye. Her tears fell freely now, tracking silver paths down her cheeks. I wrote you letters, dozens of them, but I had no address, no way to find you. Thomas burned them all anyway. He was not a kind man, Elijah. He was not who I would have chosen. The implication of her words settled over him like a heavy blanket. She had suffered while he rode across the frontier feeling sorry for himself. She had endured a marriage to a man who treated her cruelly. While he nursed his wounded pride, she had protected her family at the cost of her own happiness. I'm sorry, he said, the words wholly inadequate for the enormity of what he felt. Rose, I'm so sorry. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of garden soil across her cheek. It was a long time ago. We were different people then. Were we? He stepped closer, drawn to her despite every warning his mind tried to issue. Because standing here, looking at you, I feel exactly the same as I did when I was 19 years old, terrified and hopeful and completely certain that you are the only woman I will ever love. Rosemary's breath caught and she shook her head slowly. Don't say things you don't mean. Don't be kind to me just because you feel guilty. I have never been kind in my life. Ask anyone who knows me. I'm surly and difficult, and I've driven away every person who ever tried to get close to me since I left this place. He reached out, his calloused fingers gently tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. But I'm not lying, Rose. I've carried you with me across every mile of this country. I've seen your face in my dreams more nights than I can count. I've compared every woman I've ever met to you, and they've all fallen short. Elijah. His name was a prayer on her lips, a plea, an answer all at once. Stay, he said. Not for a month. Stay here. This is your home now. She searched his face, looking for deception, and finding none. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to have a family or run a ranch or be anything other than a lonely drifter working someone else's land, but I want to learn. I want to learn with you." From inside the house, they could hear Daniel playing, making sounds of horses galloping and cowboys whooping. A life continued in there, innocent and hopeful, unaware that outside, two broken people were trying to piece themselves back together. "Daniel doesn't know you," Rosemary said carefully. "He's had so much change in his young life. We would need to take things slowly. I have nothing but time. 8 years of wandering has taught me patience, at least." Elijah allowed himself a small smile, the first genuine smile he could remember wearing in years. "I'll sleep in the barn until you are comfortable. I'll earn his trust and yours. I'll prove that I'm not the foolish boy who ran away. I'm a man now, and I know what I want." "What do you want?" she whispered. "A home, a family." He paused, gathering courage he didn't know he possessed. "You. I want you, Rosemary. I've always wanted you. I just didn't know how to fight for you then. I know now." She collapsed against his chest, her tears soaking through his dusty shirt, her fingers clutching the worn fabric as if afraid he might disappear. He held her carefully, reverently, as one might hold something precious and fragile. And he breathed in the scent of her hair, of earth and wild flowers, and something uniquely her that time had not changed. "I thought you would hate me," she sobbed. "All these years I thought you must hate me." "I tried," he admitted, pressing his lips to the top of her head. "God knows I tried. But you're impossible to hate, Rose. You always were." The days that followed were tentative and tender. Elijah moved his few belongings into the barn loft, converting the space into modest living quarters while he worked to repair the property during the day. Daniel watched him with suspicion that gradually softened into curiosity and eventually bloomed into fascination. The boy had never had a father who paid him any attention. Thomas Whitmore had seen his son as an obligation, not a gift. But Elijah, who had no experience with children whatsoever, found himself charmed by Daniel's endless questions and boundless energy. He taught the boy to whittle, to care for horses, to identify the different birds that nested in the cottonwood trees near the creek. In return, Daniel taught him how to slow down, how to find joy in small moments, how to laugh again. Rosemary watched from the kitchen window as the man she loved and the son she cherished built a relationship piece by careful piece. She watched Elijah carry Daniel on his shoulders when the boy grew tired from walking the fen. Sea lines. She watched him patiently explain how to hold a fishing pole, how to cast into the slow-moving stream, how to wait quietly for the fish to bite. Love, she realized, was not always the burning passion of youth. Sometimes it was quieter than that. Sometimes it was steadier. Sometimes it was a man covered in dust and sweat, sitting on the porch after a long day's work, looking at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. One evening, as autumn painted the valley in shades of gold and crimson, Elijah found Rosemary standing on a small hill behind the house, watching the sunset. He approached slowly, boots crunching on fallen leaves, and stood beside her without speaking. "Your father is buried here," she said, gesturing to a simple wooden cross marking a mound of earth nearby. "He wanted to be where he could see the sunset. He said it reminded him of your mother's hair." Elijah had not visited the grave since returning. He had not known how to feel about a man he had hated for so long, a man who had apparently become someone worthy of love in his absence. Did he suffer? He asked quietly. No, he went peacefully in his sleep. I found him in the morning with a smile on his face. The doctor said his heart simply gave out. Rosemary slipped her hand into his, intertwining their fingers. He talked about you every day. He kept your room exactly as you left it, every book, every childhood treasure. He never stopped hoping. Elijah felt tears burn high. Eyes, the first tears he had allowed himself in years. I wasted so much time being angry. No time is wasted if it brings you where you need to be. She squeezed his hand. You're here now, that's what matters. He turned to face her, cupping her face in his work-roughened hands. Marry me, Rosemary, not because we have history, or because it makes practical sense for the land. Marry me because I love you, because I have loved you since I was 16 years old, and saw you reading under the apple tree in your father's orchard, because I cannot imagine facing another day without knowing you are mine and I am yours. Yes, she answered without hesitation, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative after so many years apart, but quickly deepened into something hungry and desperate, and utterly consuming. They married 3 weeks later in the small church where his parents had wed decades before. Daniel stood proudly beside Elijah, holding the simple gold band until the moment it slipped onto Rosemary's finger. The town turned out in surprising numbers, curious to see the Tanner boy returned, genuinely happy for the widow who had earned their respect through hard work and unwavering dignity. That night, after Daniel had been tucked into bed and the house settled into peaceful quiet, Elijah held his wife in his arms and marveled at the strange mercy of fate. "I came home expecting emptiness," he murmured against her hair. "I expect ghosts and grief and nothing more than land to sell." "And instead?" she asked, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on his chest. "Instead, I found everything. I found you. I found Daniel. I found the home I never knew I was searching for." He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, the tip of her nose. "I found myself, Rose, the man I was always meant to become." Outside their window, stars scattered across the endless western sky, the same stars that had witnessed their young love bloom years ago, the same stars that had watched Elijah ride away in heartbreak, same stars that now blessed their second chance with silver light. Some journeys, Rosemary thought, as she drifted towards sleep in her husband's arms, take us far from home, only to bring us back again. And sometimes the longest roads lead us exactly where we were always meant to be,